Hi, welcome back to Riding in Your Mind's Eye, the secret to reaching your personal best in riding and training. Remember the premise behind these videotapes. Practice doesn't make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. And in your imagination, you can always ride like a professional. Use these tapes to etch a vivid mental image of quality work in your mind's eye, and eventually you'll look like this picture. In this second tape of the series, I look at the movements and exercises you'll do with your horse after the work you learned on tape 1 is pretty solidly established. You might notice that the Riding in Your Mind's Eye tapes loosely follow the levels from the American Horse Shows Association dressage tests. But whether or not you ever plan to compete, you'll find this sequence of movements and exercises valuable as a guide because it offers a logical, systematic program for training your horse. Included on this tape are 10-meter circles in the trot, 15-meter circles in the canter, trot serpentines, allowing the horse to take the reins out of your hands, lengthenings in trot and canter, leg yielding, changes of lead through the trot, and counter canter. Once again, I'll give you a description of the movement and the aids before we begin the perfect practice segments. 10 and 15-meter circles. Let's begin by having a look at some circles that are smaller than the ones required from the horse who is just beginning his education. Specifically, I'll study 10-meter circles in the trot and 15-meter circles in the canter. Remember that just as with the 20-meter circles, in order to ride a good circle that benefits the horse, you need to do two things at once. Use your bending aids and produce an accurate round circle by riding to specific reference points. Now I'd like to review the aids for bending. Remember that you need to use both your inside and outside aids to ask your horse to bend as he turns along a prescribed line. Bending aids. Seat. Weight on your inside seat bone. Inside rein. Vibrate or squeeze and release. Inside leg. Place on the girth. Outside rein. Hold firm and supporting to limit bend in the neck. Outside leg. Position behind the girth. The bending aids for a circle are: keep your weight on your inside seat bone, use your inside rein to ask for flexion at the pole to the inside, put your inside leg on the girth as if it's a pole for your horse to bend around, and use it to keep his inside hind leg active. You might remember in tape 1, I explained that when your horse travels along a curved line, his inside hind leg has less ground to cover with each step than his outside hind leg does. This inside hind leg must make a higher arc than his outside leg does in order to compensate for the shorter distance it covers over the ground. To make this higher step, your horse has to bend the joints of this leg more than usual. This bending of joints is known in dressage as engagement. Hold your outside rein like a firm but elastic side rein so that it limits the degree of bend in the neck to the inside. Also, use your outside rein gently but firmly to turn your horse's outside shoulder around the circle. You can think about moving your outside hand toward your horse's withers to guide the shoulders in the direction you want to go. But be sure never to let this hand actually cross over his withers. Don't try to turn your horse with the inside rein because you'll just pull his face in and his shoulders will pop to the outside of the curved line that you're following. Place your outside leg a few inches behind the girth to help bend his body around your inside leg and to prevent his hindquarters from swinging out. Now let's do some 10 and 15-meter circles. I'll describe both the aids and the geometry of these circles so you can be completely accurate. This is important if you want to score well in a dressage test. But even if you're not riding a test and your goal is simply to train your horse the best you can, you need to be absolutely accurate in order for circles to be of any benefit to your horse. Specifically, if a circle isn't completely round, it doesn't do your horse much good. He loses the bend through his side. He avoids bending the joints of his inside hind leg. And he is subtly disobedient because he chooses the path he'll follow rather than letting you tell him where to go. First, I'll give you a timeline for your aids so you can apply them in an organized way, and then I'll go over the reference points for the circles. I'll use the same types of diagrams that I did in the first video to help you with your aids. As you look at them, notice that rein aids are illustrated by shapes like hands, seat aids are illustrated by circles, and leg aids by oblong shapes. Active aids are in black, passive aids are clear, and a vibrating rein is shown in gray. When you're about a horse's length away from the letter where you're going to start your circle, alert your horse that something is going to happen by vibrating or squeezing and releasing your inside rein and putting your weight on your inside seat bone. Then, when his nose is at the letter, apply the rest of your bending aids. You need to give the rest of the aids this early because it'll take your horse a moment to react, and you want him to actually leave the track and start the circle as your outside leg passes the letter. These aids are: keep your inside leg on the girth, move your outside leg behind the girth, and use your outside rein to limit the amount of bend in his neck as well as to initiate the turn off the track. In order to make the circles accurate, you'll need to ride to specific reference points, just as you did for the 20-meter circle on tape 1. Remember to always have 2 reference points in sight. I'll explain. Let's start with the 10-meter circle at B. As you approach the beginning point on the track at B, turn your head and look for your next point, which for the 10-meter circle is X. As you approach X, turn your head and look at your third reference point for the 10-meter circle, which is B again. For the 15-meter circle at E, your first reference point is E, and your second reference point is a spot on the far quarter line. That quarter line is 5 meters from the track, and you want to aim for a point on it that is directly across from B. When you are astride or 2 before that point on the quarter line, look over to your third reference point, which is E again, and ride to that letter. As you approach E again, direct your horse back onto the track with your outside rein and by looking straight down the long side. Using your eyes in this way is important because your horse will go in the direction you're looking. As your horse begins to follow the track, smoothly switch your aids to straight ahead aids. That is, sit equally on both seat bones, place your legs side by side, and have equal contact on both reins. Now let's watch some smoothly ridden circles. As I said earlier, we'll study a 10-meter circle in the trot at B and a 15-meter circle in the canter at E. As you watch, notice how fluidly these horses deal with the transition from going on a straight line when they're on the long side to bending when they're on the circle to going on a straight line as they continue along the track. See how they maintain the same regular rhythm, the steady tempo of the gait, and their round frame or outline. Watch how the center of gravity and balance stay the same both on the straight line and on the circle. You don't see any shift of the center of gravity to the forehand or any other loss of balance, which would be apparent if their shoulders or hindquarters deviated in or out from their line of travel rather than overlapping the line exactly. During this demonstration and all the ones that follow, I'm going to leave you in silence so you can focus all of your attention on the horses and riders. Let their images wash over you again and again until you're sure you can visualize the same picture in your mind's eye later. This is the secret to riding lovely round circles like these, as if you're on automatic pilot. Serpentine of 3 loops. In tape 1, we looked at a shallow loop in the trot. On this tape, we're looking at a 3-loop serpentine in the trot, which challenges your horse in the same way as the shallow loop does. During the serpentine, your horse has to demonstrate his lateral suppleness by changing his bend twice. This change of bend shows that he can bend equally well to the right as he does to the left. This ability is important in our never-ending quest to make our horses straight. You might remember from tape 1 that a straight horse is one whose spine overlaps his line of travel, with his hind feet following in the tracks of his front feet. This means that a straight horse is not only straight on lines, but he is also bent on circles, corners, and turns. If you need to, you can review the bending aids that I just discussed in the previous segment on circles. Right now, I'll go over the geometry of a serpentine as it's performed in a test. In a standard dressage arena, a serpentine is made up of 3 20-meter half circles. The half circles are connected for a moment by a straight line, where your horse's body should be parallel to the short side of the arena. Here's how to organize your serpentine. Start by bending your horse on the first half circle. Then, as you approach the middle of the arena, take the bend out of his body and ride him as if he's on a straight line during that one stride when he's crossing the center line. As soon as you cross the center line, change his bend and direction to begin the second loop. You'll repeat this plan as you go from the second to the third loop. As I described in tape 1, I'm going to use the words north, south, east, and west to help you find your reference points in the arena. So remember, for this purpose, I'll pretend that C is north, A is south, B is east, with E to the west. Let's say you're riding to the left and want to start a serpentine of 3 loops at C. You should go deep into the corner by M because you haven't started the serpentine yet. But as soon as you come to C, arc off the track, staying well out of the next corner, and start by riding to your reference points as if you're doing a 20-meter circle at C. This means that as you approach C, look up at a point 4 meters south of H. As you approach this point 4 meters south of H, look at another specific point on the center line 2 meters south of I. Then as you approach I on the center line, you'll be getting ready to change direction. So turn your head to the right and look toward B. Take the bend out of your horse's body so that he's on a straight line, which is parallel to the short side of the arena for a stride as you cross the center line. As you approach B, once again, look at a point on the center line, but this time 2 meters north of L. As soon as you get near this point, ride your horse as if he's on a straight line. Then turn your head to the left to look over at a new point on the long side, which is 4 meters north of K. As you approach this point on the track, look toward A. As soon as you come to A and the end of the movement, direct your horse to follow the track and go into the next corner, just as you did before you started the serpentine. Now let's look at a horse and rider doing a 3-loop serpentine in the trot. As you watch, focus on how smoothly and fluidly the horse changes his bend as his rider guides him from one loop to the other. Just relax and let your mind absorb the picture of the movement. Imagine you're sitting on this horse and can feel the ease with which he carries himself. Note the metronome-like rhythm of his trot and how his tempo or speed stays exactly the same as he smoothly changes direction. Feel how he flexes at the pole and bends through his body just as easily to the left as he does to the right. Taking the reins out of your hands. Some of the lower level dressage tests include an exercise in the rising trot during which the horse is allowed to gradually take, or what is often described as chew, the reins out of the rider's hands. Not only is this required in some of the tests, but it's also useful as a training exercise for the horse. This is because when it's done correctly, it confirms in several ways that you're on the right track with your basic work and ready to move on. First, learning to stretch over his top line in this way is a prerequisite to your being able to put your horse on the bit. Secondly, I personally like to intersperse this stretching throughout my schooling session to reward my horse. Then again, the exercise also shows that your horse moves with relaxation, responds correctly to the driving aids, and accepts a comfortable and steady contact with the bit. It proves that your horse has confidence in your hands and will follow the bit when allowed to do so. When your horse accepts the gathering of the reins without resistance at the end of the movement, it once again shows that he accepts your hands. As your horse chews the reins out of your hands, he should stretch his neck forward and downward. His nose can be anywhere from slightly in front of the vertical to slightly behind the vertical, as long as he looks like he's going toward the bit and seeking the contact. The stretching of his neck should be done gradually and smoothly, without any snatching or jerking at the reins. As your horse stretches his neck, make sure to maintain a contact with his mouth rather than letting the reins go loose. Your hands and body should stay in normal riding position. That is, your upper body is vertical and your elbows are bent at your sides. As your horse seeks the contact forward and down, he should maintain the following qualities: the regular rhythm of his steps, the steady tempo of the trot, and the round or convex look over his top line, as well as his bend along the arc of the circle. To ensure the roundness over your horse's back, as you allow him to take the reins from you, you'll need to prepare him with what I call a connecting half halt. I call this half halt a connecting half halt because when done successfully, it connects your horse from back to front. Connecting your horse starts with asking him to step forward powerfully from energetic hindquarters. If his back is relaxed, the energy that comes from his hind legs can then flow uninterrupted over his back and continue through his neck. When the power from his hind legs arrives at your hands can receive and recycle it back to his hind legs. You might remember that I introduced the connecting half halt on tape 1 when you did transitions back and forth from medium walk to free walk. I'm reviewing it here because it's such an important aid for you to teach your horse. In fact, the connecting half halt is essential to training because it's the aid that enables you to put your horse on the bit. Keep in mind that a horse won't stay on the bit all by himself. In fact, anytime you ask your horse to do something different, such as a transition from gait to gait, a change of bend, a lengthening, or lateral work, there's a very good chance that he'll come off the bit. This half halt is the aid that you'll use to reconnect him. In this particular case, however, you'll be giving a connecting half halt in order to get your horse to stretch forward and down as he takes the reins out of your hands. If you don't give the half halt before you open your fingers, he'll probably just stick his head straight up in the air, which defeats the whole purpose of the exercise. Aids for the connecting half halt. Legs. Close both legs. Outside hand. Close in a fist. Apply these aids for 3 seconds. Inside hand. Vibrate or squeeze and release if necessary. Here's a timeline for the exercise. Apply the connecting half halt a few strides before you plan to let your horse take the reins from you. Do this by closing your legs as if you're asking him to go more energetically forward over the ground. As you feel the power from the hind legs surge into your hands, close your outside hand in a fist to prevent him from actually going more forward. Apply this connecting half halt for about 3 seconds. Keep in mind that creating the energy from the hind legs is the key ingredient to giving a good half halt. You'll know you've done this successfully if you feel like you have to close your outside hand in order to keep your horse from charging more forward over the ground. This is something you should feel, but not let an observer see, because if you've synchronized your driving aids with the closing of your outside hand, there shouldn't actually be any change in the amount of ground that your horse covers with each step. If you notice that your horse bends his neck to the outside during those 3 seconds, You'll also have to give some soft squeezes on the inside rein at the same time that you close your legs and outside hand. The squeezes on the inside rein counteract the effect of your closed outside hand so that his neck stays straight in front of him rather than bending to the outside. At the end of the 3 seconds, open your fingers and allow him to take the reins out of your hands. When you open your fingers, be sure to keep your elbows bent at your sides. If you've given a good connecting half halt from back to front, he'll stretch forward, down, and toward the reins. If you need to review how to give this connecting half halt in more detail, you'll find an in-depth description in my 2 videos called The Half Halt Demystified. As you watch this next segment, notice how the horse's connection over his back, or to say it another way, the roundness of his top line, and his acceptance of the contact as he takes the reins out of the rider's hands is just an extension of the connection or roundness and acceptance of the contact that he had all along. The only difference is simply the amount of rein that his rider lets him take. Lengthenings in the trot and canter. In the early stages of a horse's training, he's asked to show his longitudinal suppleness by doing lengthenings from the working gaits to longer strides in the trot and canter, and then back to the working gaits. Think of a longitudinally supple horse as one who can easily stretch and contract his body like a rubber band. Keep in mind that you can't pull a lengthening out of thin air. The key to a good lengthening is to make sure that you have enough impulsion in the trot or canter before you ask for the lengthening. If the working pace lacks impulsion, the first thing you need to do is to make it more active so your horse has enough power to lengthen. I'll explore this idea more on the next 2 videotapes in this series when I look at the medium and extended gaits. When a horse performs a correct lengthening, you should notice 2 changes, one to the outline of his frame and the other to his stride. As he goes from a working gait to the lengthening of the same gait, his frame elongates and his strides become longer so that he covers more ground with each step. But it's important to note that as he lengthens his frame and stride, the even rhythm and the tempo, that is, the rate of repetition of the rhythm, of the trot or canter must stay the same. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2. But for the time being, you can decide if your working trot or canter has enough impulsion for a lengthening by asking yourself this simple question: could you quickly and easily do a crisp upward transition from trot to canter? or from canter to a gallop? Or would you have to add energy by revving your horse up first? If you feel like you'd need to add energy, your working pace lacks the impulsion needed for a lengthening. So add impulsion by using your inside leg to make your horse more active before asking for the lengthening with the aids I'll describe next. Aids for lengthenings. Seat. Drive by pushing the back of the saddle toward the front of the saddle. Legs. Press with both legs. Reins. Soften both hands forward. When the working trot or canter is active and energetic, all you have to do to ask for an upward transition to a lengthening is drive with your seat. Keep your back straight and push with your seat as if you're trying to move the back of the saddle toward the front of the saddle, or, to look at it another way, as if you're sitting on a swing and you're trying to swing higher. Press lightly with both legs to signal your horse that he has permission to express the energy that he had in the working trot or canter forward over the ground in longer strides. Soften your hands a bit forward to allow his frame to lengthen, but keep a contact with your horse's mouth and a bend in your elbows. Are you ready to do some perfect practice? As you watch the next riders and horses doing trot and canter lengthenings, imagine that the horses' bodies are like rubber bands that easily stretch and contract as they lengthen and shorten their frames. Pay special attention to how both the regular rhythm and the tempo of the gaits don't change during the transitions from the working gaits to the lengthenings and back to the working gaits. Note also how the balance basically stays the same without any obvious shifting to the forehand. The way to recognize this maintenance of balance is to gauge how much weight each horse is carrying on his hind legs and how much he has on his front legs while he's in the working gaits. Now ask yourself if the distribution of his weight seems to stay the same during the lengthening, or if his center of gravity shifts forward, resulting in his having more weight on his front legs. Leg yielding. The first lateral movement that you do with your horse at this stage of his training is called leg yielding. A leg yield teaches your horse to respond to your lateral aids as well as helps him develop his ability to go sideways and forward at the same time. During a leg yield, the horse's inside legs pass and cross in front of the outside legs, and he should go forward and sideways in equal measure. His spine should be straight, with his head only flexed at the pole away from the direction he's moving toward. For instance, if you ask your horse to leg yield over to the left, you want him to flex or look to the right. Your horse's spine should be almost parallel to the track that you're moving toward. The reason that his spine is not absolutely parallel is that his forehand should be just slightly ahead of his hindquarters, so it meets the track first. This positioning introduces the same alignment of his body in relation to the track that he'll be required to show later on in his education when he starts doing half passes. Aids for leg yielding. Seat. Weight equally on both seat bones. Inside rein. Vibrate or squeeze and release. Inside leg. Position behind the girth. Outside leg. Place on the girth. Outside rein. Hold firm and supporting. I'll go over the aids for a leg yield to the left with your horse moving away from your right leg because that's what our rider will be showing you at the beginning of the demonstration. However, she'll also show you some leg yields to the right away from her left leg. All you'll have to do to learn those aids is to reverse the aids that follow. For the leg yield to the left, sit so that you have equal weight on both seat bones. Ask for flexion at the pole to the right by vibrating or squeezing and releasing with your right rein. Place your right leg behind the girth for sideways movement. Keep your left leg on the girth for forward movement. Both legs should remain passive unless the horse needs to be sent either more forward or more sideways. When this happens, squeeze and release with the appropriate leg. Left leg for more forward movement and right leg for more sideways movement. Use enough left rein in a steady and supporting way to keep your horse's neck straight in front of you. Before you watch more leg yielding, I'd like to take a moment to discuss your seat. I've already said that for a leg yield to the left, for example, you should sit squarely and centered over the middle of your horse. This sounds simple, but it's common for a rider to get left behind the movement and lean, in this case to the right, when her horse starts to go sideways. So you might find it helpful to think of the following image in order to keep yourself in the center of the saddle. Visualize that you're going to put your outside seat bone, in our example it would be the right seat bone, in the center of the saddle. This way you can go with your horse as he steps sideways and forward, rather than getting left behind to the right. Sit back now and study these leg yielding shots over and over so you can program your mind with the right image. Note particularly the horse's inside legs crossing over his outside legs, the regular rhythm of the trot, the alignment of his body in relation to the track, the ease with which he carries himself rather than leaning on his rider's hands, as well as how freely he flows across the arena. Change of canter lead through the trot. At this stage of your horse's education, you ask him to switch from one canter lead to the other by bringing him back to the trot for a few steps before you ask for the new lead. I'll go over the aids for the change of lead through the trot shortly on this videotape. On tape 3, I'll show you how to do a more difficult change of canter lead through the walk called a simple change. Eventually, you'll teach your horse to do a flying change of lead, where he switches from one canter lead to the other in midair. I'll discuss flying changes on tape 4. However, back to the change of lead through the trot. First, you ask your horse to do a downward transition from one canter lead to the trot, and then 3 or 4 strides later, ask him to pick up the other lead. Aids for the transition from canter to trot. Legs. Close both legs. Reins. Close both hands. Seat. Still your seat. The aids for the downward transition from the canter to the trot are as follows. First, close both legs as you would do for an upward transition. This keeps your horse's hind legs active and stepping well under his body. Then, close both hands into fists to catch and contain the energy created by your legs. Basically, your legs create energy and your hands capture and recycle that energy back to the horse's hind legs. Then, while sitting with equal weight on both of your seat bones, signal the downward transition to the trot by stilling your seat. To still your seat, use your back in a stopping, non-following, or retarding way by stretching up tall and tightening your stomach muscles as if you're doing a sit-up. This will cause you to brace your lower back. You should brace your back just long enough to bring him to the trot. As soon as he steps into the trot, relax your back again. Aids for the canter to part from the trot. Seat. Weight on your inside seat bone. Inside rein. Vibrate or squeeze and release. Inside leg. Place on the girth. Outside rein. Hold firmly and close your hand in a fist. Outside leg. Swing behind the girth. The aids for the upward transition to the canter are: put your weight on the inside seat bone. Use your inside rein to position your horse's head just enough to the inside so you can see his inside eye. Squeeze with your inside leg on the girth to promote forward movement. Hold your outside rein steady. Then, when you're ready to give the aid for the canter to part with your leg, close this outside hand in a fist. Closing your outside hand helps him to start the canter with his outside hind leg. This is the leg that he must start cantering with in order to end up on the correct lead. If you don't close your outside hand in a fist, there's a good chance that your horse might just trot on faster rather than step into the canter. Swing your outside leg behind the girth once in a windshield wiper-like action to signal the outside hind leg to strike off into the first beat of the canter. In this exercise, both downward and upward transitions should be made promptly, yet look smooth. The regular rhythm, tempo, and forward movement of the canter and the trot should be maintained right up to the moment of the transition to the next gait. Counter canter. About this point in your horse's education, introduce the counter canter to him. Counter canter is an exercise that's used to supple and increase self-carriage by encouraging your horse to shift his center of gravity a bit more toward his hind legs. Basically, in counter canter, you ask your horse to canter on what is normally considered the wrong lead going in that direction. In other words, when he's going to the left around the arena, you're asking him to canter on his right lead. While doing this, you should keep your horse flexed at the pole so he looks in the same direction as his leading leg, but be very careful not to bend his neck in that direction or you'll lose control of his outside shoulder. When this happens and the shoulder falls to the outside of his line of travel, counter canter becomes an on the forehand exercise, something we always try to avoid, rather than an exercise to increase self-carriage. Aids for counter canter. Seat. Weight on your inside seat bone. Inside rein. Vibrate or squeeze and release. Inside leg. Place on the girth. Outside rein. Hold firm and supporting to limit bend in the neck and control the outside shoulder. Outside leg. Position slightly behind the girth. So for example, the aids for a right lead counter canter while tracking to the left are the same as the aids which are used for a normal right lead canter when tracking to the right. Your weight is on your right seat bone. Use your right rein for flexion at the pole. Your right leg is on the girth. Support with your left rein to prevent your horse from bending his neck to the right and therefore losing his shoulder to the left of the line of travel. Your left leg is slightly behind the girth. In a dressage test at this level, you need to show counter canter for just a few strides as you make a shallow loop off and back onto the long side of the arena. Start by tracking to the right while in right lead canter so that you're in normal canter. After coming through the second corner of the short side of the ring, arc gently off the track. Canter toward the center of the ring, and when you're a few strides from the center line, gradually turn back toward the track. Aim for the long side just before the next corner. In this exercise, you'll only be doing counter canter for a few strides, the strides during which you're changing direction and heading back toward the long side that you were on originally. As you watch the next horse doing counter canter, feel how the quality of the canter always stays the same. That is, the counter canter has the same rhythm, roundness, impulsion, ease, and balance as the true canter. Remember, if you find yourself struggling with a particular movement when you're riding your horse, take the time to review this tape and tape one at home several times before you ride again. The more frequently you program your mind with the right mental pictures, the sooner you'll be able to reproduce them for real. In the third video of this series, I'll discuss the movements that you can do with your horse at his next stage of training. These movements include shoulder in, haunches in, turns on the haunches, medium trot and canter, rein back, more counter canter, a one-handed release of contact during the canter, and simple changes of lead. Until then, have fun improving your skills by riding in your mind's eye. I know you'll get as excited about it as I am when you begin to make some positive changes in your riding. See you again soon.